What's up, everyone? Good morning. Welcome to The Sweat, presented by DraftKings. I am Emerson Lotzia. We are buried underneath a foot of snow outside, but myself and a few others here at DK are once again overcoming the adversity and putting this company on our back like Jansport, on our shoulders like boulders, because we care about you. Yes, you. We've got a little college football championship preview for everybody, plus how to successfully navigate the NBA and NHL slates tonight. One is bigger than the other. We will start with our NFL panel's best bets, though, for the final week of the regular season. Let's go. Week 18. Good morning to DraftKings contributors Pierce Dietrich, Jeff Ulrich, and Steve Buchanan. Steve, I'd like to start with you. You were here on time. What's your favorite spread this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty, obviously, with the NFL right now, but I have no problem taking the Rams minus 4.5 this week in that matchup. I just think that they should roll over the 49ers. I think this 49ers team, one of the biggest frauds in the NFL, they might have a good record. This team stinks, okay? It's like the Ravens. You're watching the Ravens. You look at their record, you go, how do they have this kind of record? I have no idea. I love the Rams this week. I think they should have no problem covering at home against a 49ers team that is trying to get into the playoffs, but they're also trying to stop a team that's trying to get Cooper Kupp a new NFL record. Give me the Rams minus 4.5. Come on now.
All right, Pierce, go ahead, dude. Your favorite spread.
Well, let's talk about the other fraud that Steve just mentioned, the Ravens. They're not a good team. We just watched the Ravens lose to the Steelers, and somehow the Steelers are getting 6 points. The Steelers are going to win this game. Narratives aside, you can throw out that this is Big Ben's last game, whatever. The Steelers are probably the better team in this matchup. They match up really well. You've got a really good pass rush in the Steelers against an offensive line for the Ravens that's been terrible all season. We talk about all the terrible parts for the Ravens. We don't talk about their line enough. It's a bad offensive line, 26th in adjusted sack rate. Huntley and Lamar have dealt with pressure every single week. They, I think, 19 blitzes against the Ravens in the last matchup, 33% pressure rate against the Ravens dealt by the Steelers. Last week, the Steelers got 9 sacks on Baker Mayfield. That's going to be a big strength for them. And then offensively, Ben matches up well against this team. He understands this scheme. And I know the line is moved because Deontay Johnson isn't going to play. But let's think about this for a second. He targeted Johnson 15 times last week for 31 yards. We're losing 31 yards. Oh, my goodness. That's going to kill us. Actually, it's probably good. This is going to force Ben to throw the ball to Clable, to Ray, to Pat Fryermuth, to Washington, to be more efficient instead of just leaning on Johnson for 31 yards again. I think that this is a steal.
Jeff, did I just hear you giggling?
I mean, it's a pretty impressive stat to get 31 yards on that many targets. It might be a record. I think Ben could have just rushed for 31 yards. Actually, he probably couldn't have. I'm on that game. I'm going to talk about that game a little bit too. But I like, since we're throwing out teams that might be frauds this year, I really don't know why Arizona all of a sudden is 7-point favorites. I think the line may have come down to 6.5 now. It's been fluctuating, but Seattle, I get it. Like, they're not that good a team either. It's still Russell Wilson on the other side. You have to cover 7 points against. We saw him, what he was doing with DK Metcalf in the last game. He's looked better. Seattle, too, as underdogs over the last 5 years with Pete Carroll, 18-3-1 against the spread. Arizona's also only 2-5 against the spread at home. This is still a team that's really struggled in the passing game without DeAndre Hopkins. Even last week, Kyler was more efficient, but like the big plays weren't there. I don't think Arizona is in any shape to be blowing out teams, let alone one with a quarterback like Russell Wilson. So I really like the +7, even +6.5. I'll take anything over +6 on Seattle this week.
All right, well, let's now go to favorite money line bet then. Pierce, you're up.
We're going to go with the Bengals. So we pull data from the last 20 years. We look at the AFC North and games with a projected total of 40 or less. So we're not expecting a lot of points. And in those games, the underdog has won 7 of those 8 games. I like that trend. I like the Bengals. I know the Bengals are resting some players, but the Browns are resting some players as well. The Browns didn't see, even with the players that they put on the field on Monday night, didn't seem like they were trying that hard. On paper, any way you want to look at it, the Bengals are a better team. Brandon Allen's not a terrible quarterback. He was halfway decent on a really bad team last year. If you look at the Browns, they got 14 players on the injury list. Some of those guys aren't going to play. Some of those guys are going to go out and not even care because it's the last game of the season. The Bengals still have some seeding to play for here. I like the Bengals to win outright, and that's what the trend says is going to happen.
All right, Jeff, who do you like here on the money line?
So we've already talked ad nauseum about the Steelers. I mean, Pierce laid it all out. I think just taking the Steelers on the money line plus 170 is absolutely fine. So I'm going to talk about a different game here with bigger odds too. And I think like you could think about, there's multiple underdogs I think are in play this week. Pierce laid out the Bengals. I think the Bears are in play. What do the Vikings have to play for? I think if anything, this Vikings team will probably be happy if they lose because it's a better chance Mike Zimmer isn't coming back. This defense has absolutely quit on Mike Zimmer. They're not good at guarding against wide receiver position at all. You've got Darnell Mooney, who was targeted 13 times by Andy Dalton last week. I think he's in line for a big game. The offense, I get it. Like the Bears offense isn't good, but this Vikings team, man, I just don't know what they have to play for. Are they really just going to march Justin Jefferson out there for 20 targets? I don't know. And even if they do, you still have Kirk Cousins back there playing quarterback. So I think a plus 185, the Bears are the team here with more motivation. Andy Dalton probably fighting for a contract next year. I don't know what the Vikings are playing for, except for perhaps the hope that Mike Zimmer won't be back. So I really like the Bears here. I think they're very live at plus 185.
Steve, who are you feeling on the money line, dude?
No, I need to respond. Pierce, when was the last time that trend hit? You said you went back 20 years. When was the last time that trend hit?
I think it was 2012.
2012. Pierce, this is 2022. This is week 18. What does that trend have to do with anything for today, for this week?
It's a decade rule, Steve. It's like you throw something on the ground, it's 10 seconds. Pierce is going by the decade rule.
He is the oldest man that we have on this show mentally, not physically, mentally. Okay, let's talk about a money line. Who bets money lines anymore? Does anybody bet money lines? I certainly don't, but I'm going to answer the question. The Chargers are going to beat the Raiders, okay? That is probably the most enticing money line on here, minus 160. You can look at that game last week for the Raiders and said, oh, they kind of gave the Colts a run for their money. They gave the Colts a run for their money because the Colts cannot play when they're behind, because then they have to rely upon Carson Wentz. And when you have to rely upon Carson Wentz, that's when the team doesn't win. So if you go ahead of the Colts, you're going to cruise in the playoffs here. The Chargers should have no problem against this team, against the Raiders. They can't stop the run. We'll talk about Austin Eckler in a minute here. The Chargers should absolutely run train on this Raiders team. Minus 160 on the money line. Give me that one, babe.
All right, as for totals, Jeff, what's your favorite Week 18 total here on the DK Sportsbook? There are not a lot of big ones.
No, there's just so many games here where, 41, 37. I mean, you can kind of take your pick about where you want to go. But I'm actually going to go over on, I think it's the biggest total of the week, at least the biggest total on like the main Sunday slate, and that's Seattle, Arizona. I think you're going to see points in this game. I really do. Again, we don't have weather concerns to worry about. You've got a healthy Kyler Murray running the ball. The Seattle defense isn't good. I mean, I know they've picked up their sack rate a little bit, but this is still a secondary that can't guard against anyone. They allowed Cooper Kupp to go nuts against them. I think Christian Kirk, is in a very good spot as well. And then on the other side as well, I mean, you've got two elite wide receivers going up against a team that allows a lot of yardage to wide receivers. And we've seen Kyler and Russ get in these shootout type games before. Like, they like playing against each other. I think this game has a very good chance to be the one you should be targeting for DFS as well. And I like going over the 48. I think on a regular week, if this was a week 18, this game easily sees a 50 total.
Okay, Steve, how about you?
Yeah, there's a lot of totals on here. Like, I want nothing to do with totals. Like, one of our questions is what game you want to have nothing to do with. It's actually totals. That's what I want to have nothing to do with. With that being said, I do like over 41.5 between Carolina and the Buccaneers. If they're going to give up 24 points to the Jets, that just goes to show how atrocious that Buccaneers secondary is going to be. That is going to be their biggest weakness when it comes to the playoffs. Not the guys that they've lost on offense. It's going to be how they cannot defend against any other team. So if you're allowing the Jets to get 24 points against you, I think the Buccaneers are going to put up points against the Panthers. They got some incentives they need to hit, like with Rob Gronkowski and whatnot, but over 41.5 feels like the play in this one here. It's not going to go, cruising over, but I feel like that one has one of the best chances of hitting the over.
Last time a player tried to hit his incentives there with Tampa Bay, ended up stripping in the end zone and running out and quitting. Anywho, Pierce, total, Week 18.
Bengals Browns over 38 points. We talked about this yesterday, and I did some research over the last 20 years. I don't know what kind of research Steve's doing with talking about running trains, but over 20 years, we've seen 34 and 18 the over has hit. I'm not the one that said it. Overs have hit 34 of 18 times. So the sportsbook expects, these teams are going to rest their players. But the points end up getting scored in these games because the defenses are resting as well. I believe in Case Keenum. He's been a good quarterback this season.
Are you okay? What's happening? We can only see you. You have to share with the viewers what you were giggling about.
It's not appropriate.
Case Keenum's good. Case Keenum was good with Minnesota. He was good with Denver. He had one bad season in Washington, and we've already thrown this guy away. All he's got to do is not throw 300 interceptions. He's better than Baker Mayfield. Cut to the next person.
We are officially off the rails here. Friday morning is my favorite morning. Speaking of favorite, your favorite player prop, Steven?
Boy. Let's go back to that game of talking about trains with the Chargers and the Raiders. Austin Eckler's rushing prop just seems really low for this game. It's only set at 56.5. This is somebody that he went over 100 yards against earlier this season on just 15 carries, at 117 yards against the Raiders. If I like the Chargers to win this game, I most certainly am going to like Austin Eckler to go over his rushing yard prop in this one at 56.5. This is a number that he's going over consistently. Now, you could push back and say that the Chargers are using a little bit more of a committee really since Justin Jackson got into the mix, a little bit of Joshua Kelly. Maybe they want to rest up for the playoffs here, but if he's going to have that type of output that he had earlier in the season against the Raiders, it's only got to take a handful of carries for him to go over this 56.5 total, so I like the over on that one.
All right, Pierce, how about you, man? Keep it together.
Yeah, let's forget about trains. Let's talk about Jets. Zach Wilson over 192.5 yards. Zach Wilson over 192.5 yards passing. They're 16-point dogs, which means they're going to see a lot of passing, which means they're going to be down by a lot late. So not only will the Jets have to pass a lot, they might face a soft prevent defense that's going to allow him to go over. He's gone over 190 yards in 7 of 12 games this season. He's gone over 200 yards in 4 of his last 5. He's averaging 34 pass attempts in his last 5 games. It seems like the Jets are doing the smart thing, which they rarely do, and saying, hey, let's see what we have with Zach Wilson. Let's turn him loose. Let's see if he can throw the ball for 192 yards. I know Buffalo is good, but this game sets up pretty well for him to get over this.
Jeff, bring us home here in the player prop department.
Bring us home. Last time this panel ever be together, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Look, we don't have all the props up for the Steelers game, but I really feel like you've got to take advantage of this Deontay Johnson situation. We know the Steelers are going to pass the ball, and the Ravens secondary is just so bad. I think you got to take the over on Chase Claypool. His receiving yardage prop is up right now. It's 57.5. This is still a player who's just capable of hitting this prop in 2 catches, essentially. And I like targeting Claypool for a touchdown this week as well. Somehow this dude has 1 touchdown on the year. 1. He had 9 last year, and he's got 1. I don't know. I mean, I think you've got to play the Claypool props at least 1 more week for the over with Johnson out. We've seen him be in high usage roles too. He's had games with like 9, 11 targets before this year when the Steelers have been a little bit shorthanded. He's got to do something against this Baltimore Ravens secondary.
What do you know, guys? I was told we're out of time all of a sudden, even with 1 more question to go. Just a wonderful job. Way to just fill us with joy and warm happiness today, Pierce. Thank you so much. Jeff, we do need you for some NHL opening faceoff coming up. We'll also preview the College Football National Championship later with Ben Rasa. But first, it's time for our weekly conversation on the state of the Cowboys with Nick Eatman of DallasCowboys.com.
Well, we've been talking about the Dallas Cowboys going to the playoffs all season long. Turns out that will be a reality. The Cowboys, NFC East champs for the first time since 2018. Let's get into it with Nick Eatman, covers the Cowboys and has for the last couple of decades for the team's website. I am Adam Kaufman. Nick, of course, 1 game left in the regular season, and that is against an Eagles team that your guys absolutely throttled by 20 points back in September. Thing is, again, that was September. So does that game then mean anything now?
Well, I think it means some, just because Philadelphia, they're playing better. I don't know if they've changed, a ton of what they're doing. And so, yeah, I think that from that game and the way they were able to force, Jalen Hurts to throw the ball and get rattled a little bit. But since then, Philly's changed. They're running it better. Now they've kind of changed the way that their style. So I'm sure that Philly will say they're a different team. They haven't beaten a team with a winning record, so it's hard to kind of say that they've turned the corner. I think that they've gotten above average and they're beating some of those other teams. But we'll see what happens when they face a team that's Cowboys are better than the teams that they've been beating.
This latest loss against the Cardinals last time out at home, it ended a 4-game winning streak. So that's, the one end of things. On the other, of course, it's a possible playoff matchup that we could be seeing in another couple weeks. So that potential preview we'll have time to get into, obviously, in the days and weeks to come. But the biggest news to come out of that game, specifically the loss of Michael Gallup, again, this time permanently for the rest of the season, the torn ACL. He's only played 9 games this year, so the Cowboys have been used to him not being on the field. That being said, how big a loss is this for Dallas?
I think it's a big loss because he's the guy that has made the most contested catches of the season. I mean, he may not be your fastest or most dynamic or whatever, but when it comes to sideline catches or back of the end zone or just anything, I mean, he made a catch with his torn ACL. He tore his ACL before he turned and spun and made the catch. So his concentration on the sideline has been outstanding. And, they're not getting a lot of separation with the receivers aren't. So you're going to have to throw it. These guys are going to have to make plays. And he's been the guy, I think, that's made the most plays when it comes to crowds and being covered. So I think it's going to be a big loss. Cedric Wilson's a good player, and he's been very versatile. So I think they'll be fine. But, I do think it's a big loss. He was starting to kind of come into his own again, Michael Gallup was.
You mentioned Cedric Wilson. Obviously, he's the one that had the enhanced workload with Michael Gallup out the first time around earlier this year. And Wilson did have some big games to his credit as well. Does he just automatically slide right into that third wide receiver role?
Yes, he does. And the thing about Wilson is that he's probably gotten the most work with Dak off the field. There's been a lot of stories written about how last 2 years, Dak put a football field in his backyard. They call it backyard football. And Wilson, I think, was a regular every time there. And you see that rapport with them on the field. Just kind of when plays break down, I think Wilson has a good understanding of where he needs to be, sit in the zone and all that stuff. And Dak, has a lot of trust in him. So I don't think they're going to miss much there. And he's got versatility. He throws passes now. He does things. So he's a good player, and he's better than a lot of teams' third receivers, I think. So they're not going to miss a lot, but I do think Gallup was starting to really come into his own.
Micah Parsons, top draft pick, obviously, for Dallas, has been one of the best defensive players in the NFL this season among rookies. And, he's right there in the company with some of the top defensive guys in general, quite frankly. He is now seemingly unavailable this weekend. He's been placed on the COVID list. We'll see how all of this plays out, obviously. But how big a loss is he, presuming he's not on the field?
He's huge. I mean, he's a huge loss if he's not able to play in that game or any game. If it's going to happen. I mean, you probably want your best defensive player to miss this game, which there's debate on whether or not he was going to play a lot anyways. But him coming back to Philadelphia, coming back to Pennsylvania, where he's from, that area and closest to home, and I'm sure he was excited about returning and going to that game. So, but as it stands, that they announced it, on Wednesday, and he entered the protocols. And so there's so many different things, whether he was close contact or test positive or whatever. So, it probably doesn't help that they moved the game from Sunday to Saturday from his perspective. But again, we'll see how it all plays out. Nobody's ruling him out of the game just yet, but it doesn't seem that likely considering he was probably not going to play the whole time anyway.
The first NBA Friday of 2022 is here. A great slate of 9 games, including 2 of the best in the East, battling in Brooklyn, where the Nets are going to host the Bucks at 7:30 Eastern Time. DraftKings contributor Gary and Thorne, DraftKings contributor Matt Meiselman here for a little healthy dose of building blocks. Gary, who are you going to build around at center?
Yeah, this is a weird game, and maybe some people will be scared away by the potential for a blowout because the Jazz just aren't bringing anyone to Toronto, but I think I'm going to go with PASCAL SIAKAM. I think we can kind of trust PASCAL SIAKAM again as a viable DFS candidate, especially when he's $9,000. This is someone who, in his last 5 games, has averaged 25 points, 11.4 rebounds, 6.6 assists. He's gone over 50 DraftKings points in 4 of those 5 contests, basically playing faux center for the Raptors. I think that's why the rebounding numbers have been so great, because the Raptors really aren't starting a traditional center, and he's had to fill that role. the Jazz's defense should probably be pretty anemic in this game. And while maybe Siakam is limited to less than 30 minutes because of a lopsided script, the Raptors just tend to play their starters longer than any team anyway. I mean, he's someone averaging almost 38 minutes per game across his last 9 starts. So it would take a really, really crazy set of circumstances in my mind for him to not reach 30 minutes. And I just think in this particular game, he'll easily hit value in those 30 minutes. So I just think Siakam's a really nice play.
Matt, who's a really nice play there? Give me someone big and beefy at the 5.
Well, the biggest and beefiest guy is Nikola Jokic.
Yeah.
I do think we have to. I think Siakam is a good call because the Jazz without Rudy Gobert are really bad defensively. We saw Jokic do well against them last game, but the two centers that I think I just have to mention, one is Jokic because his upside is just much larger than anyone else on any given slate, and it's a good matchup against the Sacramento Kings at home. But then in that Jazz game, we don't know yet if he's playing, but Hassan Whiteside is $3,500, and he may play more than half the minutes. Like, this is a weird situation because the Jazz have 4 players who are questionable. And some people might be worried the game could get canceled, something like that. They actually do have 8 additional bodies, even if all 4 of the regulars, Jordan Clarkson, Royce O'Neal, Rudy Gay, and Hassan Whiteside, even without those guys, they're still playing this game. So if Whiteside's out there, like, that's almost a can't-miss spot. So this is one to definitely keep an eye on as news breaks throughout the day.
Well, Matt, take me to forward here. Give me a guy who's worth building your lineup around.
Yeah, so I'm just checking
Hey,
this
Gary.
Jazz team again to make sure I have the positions right. But if Rudy Gay is out there, he's $4,000. And we saw him actually play center the other night against Denver because Gobert was out and Whiteside was out. And I do think that that's a possible scenario for tonight, too, because the guys I just mentioned, all 4 of them for Utah are questionable. Those are like the 4 rotation players they have left. It's definitely possible that Rudy Gay plays and Whiteside doesn't, and Rudy Gay is going to play the majority of the center minutes, assuming the game stays at least relatively close. So if we get the scenario where Gay's in and Whiteside's out, I think you just lock Rudy Gay into your lineups because he almost can't fail. If Whiteside's in too, I still think you can play him, but this is definitely another player where, like, I think you just have to watch Utah. You probably need something from this game in some capacity.
Gary, and how about you, man?
Yeah, I mean, I think sort of backing up what Matt's been saying, and one of the reasons I also like Siakam is I think if you are going to end up stacking some of these, secondary, tertiary Jazz pieces, that you do, I mean, if they're to hit their ceiling, it's likely a more competitive game than we're predicting, which would mean someone like Siakam, someone like Fred VanVleet would be a very good way to bring back that particular stack. And I also think it's worth noting that this is a very unique situation. I think we've seen teams sort of have these rest nights, these faux rest nights. Golden State in particular, though, did something that I think kind of set a bit of a precedent, and it might be something that we have to look into a lot as the season sort of progresses. But with the Jazz having a couple positive cases in the last few days, they basically didn't want to send most of their best players to Toronto and have the possibility of them being trapped beyond the border for 14 days. So I think a lot of the questionable guys, again, this is just a guess, but the fact that they traveled with the team, unlike Conley, unlike Donovan Mitchell, I think that probably suggests they're playing. But again, we'll have to kind of keep an eye on that. Aside from just the Jazz, the gift that keeps on giving on this slate, I would say Giannis Antetokounmpo obviously is someone you have to look at tonight. He's probably the stud I would most want to pay up for. He's $11,400. Somehow, you wouldn't think it's possible to do better than the 1.7 DraftKings points he averages just in general per minute so far this season, but that actually goes up with Jrue Holiday off the court because Giannis takes over more of a facilitating role. He's averaging 1.76 DraftKings points per minute in that scenario. That's about the only thing that's even close to the stratosphere of Jokic in 2021, 2022. And I think for Giannis, you always just have to pinpoint the games that could be competitive. This is someone who's only had to play 36 plus minutes 7 times this season, but the 7 times he's done it, he's averaged almost 70 DraftKings points per game. So I think this could be pretty competitive against the Nets. And also that Nets defense, I know it's probably going to be better with Kyrie not playing tonight, but it just looked terrible against the Pacers. It almost seemed like they didn't care. They probably will care more against Milwaukee, but I just think it's a really nice matchup for Giannis too.
All right, well, speaking of that, Gary, which guard has building block potential?
Yeah, so we'll go back to the Jazz again. I just think if the questionable guys traveled, they're probably going to play. Clarkson's going to be real chalky, but I just have a hard time envisioning a scenario where he doesn't hit 6x, 7x value tonight. I mean, he's $5,500. The minutes he's played so far this season with Mitchell, with Conley, with Bogdanovich off the court, he's got a 34% usage rate. He's averaging over a DraftKings point per minute, despite the fact that in those minutes, he's only shooting 31% from the field. Like, that's how voluminous these scenarios have been. He doesn't have to be efficient at all, and he's been hitting value. So I think Clarkson's just guaranteed 30 minutes if he ends up being active for this contest, and that's going to be more than enough time to pay off his salary. So just another Jazz player who's viable on the slate.
All right, Matt, where are you going in the guard department?
Yeah, I'll give another player that isn't the chalk because that's kind of what I've been sticking to for this. But of course, if Clarkson's in, he's a cash game lock 100%. And even for GPPs, you probably just have to play him. I mean, there's a chance of a blowout here, but he's just so far underpriced with all the guys that are out. But the more contrarian player I'll mention here is that Trae Young is questionable tonight, but it's actually a really good matchup on the road against the Lakers. And if he plays, I think that questionable tag that he probably carries past lock, I think that's going to end up scaring people off. So Trae Young always has massive upside, especially when he's being guarded by Russell Westbrook for at least some of the game. But it's just the Lakers aren't a really good defense, and I think Trae could do well against them. And I would think at very, very little ownership. So I really like Trae a lot if he plays.
Hey, Matt, who can you build around if you want to do so with a value play?
So it's the Jazz, but I'll give a different team since all we've been talking about is the Jazz. The San Antonio Spurs are actually missing a lot of guys tonight for COVID protocols. And then Lonnie Walker, who is one of the guys who actually has an injury designation, not COVID protocols, he's questionable too. So if Walker plays, I think he's a good value play. But if he's out, then it gets really thin really fast for the Spurs backcourt. In that scenario, I think BRYN Forbes at 3,500 has just a lot of upside because he's going to have to play tons of minutes, and he's someone who can get hot from three. That's kind of like his game. So he could hit 5 or 6 threes. It's not a great matchup against the Sixers. It's actually a pretty bad one. But for someone who's going to play 30-plus minutes at that price, potentially, I think there's a lot of upside there.
Gary and value. I know you've hooked us up with some already.
Yeah, same game. I think there's a lot of Spurs who could be viable here. I do have concerns that if Walker does come back, we saw it with DeJounte Murray. They did limit him to less than 30 minutes in his first game back. That's still a sizable chunk of time for someone who's in that 4K tier. So I think Walker's still viable, but someone like Bates Diop, I could just see him playing like 38 minutes out of necessity. He obviously brings a little bit more tertiary category upside than someone like BRYN Forbes, who really just need to hit 6 3-pointers. I mean, Bates Diop can contribute with rebounds, with blocks, with steals. He's actually someone who across his last 8 games was already averaging more than a DraftKings point per minute. So if his minutes volume starts getting up to the point where he's only one of 8 guys on the active roster tonight, I think he's just a shoo-in for a value play, someone you really have to take a serious look at.
All right, what's your favorite NBA bet tonight on the DK Sportsbook, Gary? And we'll get you guys out of here with this.
So this could possibly be the chalkiest thing that has ever happened in the NBA, but I am such a sucker that I cannot avoid this tonight. We have got the team that has been the best at covering against the spread by a wide margin going up against the team that has been the worst at covering the spread by a wide margin. I am just going to take the Cavaliers -6 in Portland. Again, it's just the strength versus the weakness. I think it's easy to just knock Portland when they don't have access to their 2 best players. They've been a terrible defensive team. The Cavaliers are just so sturdy and trustworthy. I'm just going to trust the trends here. I'll just take the Cavaliers blind.
All right, Matt, what about you?
So I actually like the Cavs for that exact reason. I think the line is inflated because people are seeing this, and the spread actually already moved from 4 to 6. So I like Cavs +6, but I'll just mention another game quickly. I think I've said in the past, Nikola Jokic is the most important player for spreads in the NBA. I'm taking it back. It's Trae Young specifically for totals. Like, to me, the fair over-under if Trae Young's in versus if he's out is like a 15-point gap because he's so good at offense and he's so bad at defense and he drives the pace to such a significant extent. So looking at the total in the Hawks-Lakers game, it's 229 right now. If Trae's in, I like the over. If Trae's out, I like the under. Like, I don't know if he's going to play or not, but he's so important for the total of the game that I think just whichever way it breaks, you have a bet on either side of it.
Gentlemen, I hope both of you have the best weekend ever. Thank you so much for your help. We're going to help all of you watching right now stack those NHL lineups after this quick break.
I don't think anybody thinks Jonathan Taylor's not going to have a huge game against Jacksonville.
Love it. We got a teeny tiny 2-game slate around the NHL tonight, but that will not stop us from going all in with DraftKings contributor Jeff Ulrich and Roto Wire's AJ Scholes and Paul Bruno. We're talking DFS here, guys. AJ, who is your favorite play at center?
Well, first, Emerson, we didn't have these kind of issues yesterday when Jeff was hosting. So, maybe we need to go all in on Jeff.
No, careful what you wish for, pal. Although Jeff is...
I got your back, Emerson. Don't worry.
Thank you, Paul. That's why you're my favorite.
But anyway, to the 2-game slate, I think the team most worth targeting here is the Capitals. And I'm going to start with Kuznetsov at 6,500 at the center position. 3 points in 3 games back since returning from injury. He remains a fixture on that top line with Alexander Ovechkin. And I would suggest of the matchups tonight, Washington probably has the easiest, and that's very light, easy. He doesn't break the bank compared to Sebastian Aho, who's at 8,200. If you're not as high on Washington as I am, I would maybe look at Vinny Trocheck, 5K. He's playing on what I would call the Canes 1B line, with Svechnikov and Fast.
Jeff, talk to me, dude. Center.
Yeah, there's just so much value on this slate. Obviously, Ryan O'Reilly makes for a great pick, but I think you have to roster Sebastian Aho tonight. And I get the matchup on paper doesn't look that good. It's the Calgary Flames. The Flames have been getting killed by the Eastern Conference elites over the last couple starts. I think you might see, this is kind of a trend happening in the West right now. Some of these West teams, like the Oilers included, just that have started well, they're just kind of saying, maybe they're not as good as we think they might have been. The Flames have ridden some hot goaltending. I think they're going to be in for a world of hurt tonight. This Carolina offense, we already mentioned Trocheck. It's good from top to bottom, and Aho, 16 points in his last 10 games, averaging nearly 4 shots on goal. I think at 8,200, you can even argue, he's not a value, but he's certainly not overly expensive just for the production that he's gotten you. And I think a lot of people are going to be taking those as a stance of, I'll pay up for maybe Ovechkin and leave Aho out. I think that's the wrong thing. You should be stacking the Canes tonight, and I think you start with Aho at center.
Paul, Aho is nearly $2,000 more than the next guy at center.
Look, the guys are all over it, so I'm just going to wash, rinse, and repeat here real quickly. On a small slate, I think the ownership of the top options is a key at center because it's quite a drop off below that. Compelling cases for all 3 mentioned. Aho priced at $8,200, $1,700 higher than any other pivot, but the guy's 16 points in his last 10 games. Calgary's on the second of back-to-back games, so I think they're a little vulnerable. And Carolina has one of the best home ice records in the league. In the other game, Kuznetsov is a very attractive option because he's still the caddy for Ovechkin. His price tag is only $6,500, while he has only 6 points in 10 games. This is a tempting option because St. Louis has been a little loose defensively. I can't wait to see AJ rip on Binnington later in the show. I'm sure he will, but he's given up 15 goals in the last 4 starts. The only other center I might consider is the aforementioned Vinny Trocheck, the second-line center in Carolina. He's got 8 points in his last 9 games and will be part of the power play as usual, so you have to have him in all the high leverage minutes. He only costs only $5,000.
Guys, let's go over to the wings and things department here. Jeff, your favorite play here? I'm looking at Ovi's $9,200, but on this 2-game slate, he has that multi-goal potential.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm going to leave the bigger names for the other 2 guys because, again, we got a short slate. We got to think about a little bit contrarian here. Is there anyone we can target that kind of no one's going to be on, or at least we're going to get really low ownership, but has some upside for us? And I think Daniel Sprong is a name that you should be really considering tonight. We mentioned already the Blues goaltending situation. Like Jordan Binnington, the Blues just don't mind getting into shootouts. And I think you'll probably see this game devolve into some kind of 4-3, 5-3 game. And Daniel Sprong is a player. He's proven not only this year, but like last year as well, he's fully capable of getting you 5 shots on net and a goal. He's a goal scorer at heart, and he plays over 14 minutes. He's on the second line for Washington. He's going to get a little bit softer minutes because teams always hyper-focus on the OV line. And again, he's just got a really good matchup. I think you look at a player like Sprong, he's averaging 2.6 shots on net, but those upside games are really what you want to be targeting, and especially for GPPs on a shorter slate. Sprong brings the upside. He's boom or bust, but again, I think you can get way lower ownership than on some of these other bigger names. I like targeting him tonight.
All right, Paul, who are you going to target?
Well, the grade 8's obviously a big choice. He's going to be heavily owned, so I might prefer to take a look at least 2 of the 3 below him, GAUDREAU, Teravainen, and Tkachuk. I prefer this option because I see all 3 of those guys are on positive streaks, and each of them is capable of having the big night of the night. So that's where I'll be headed, I think. GAUDREAU, Teravainen, and Tkachuk, if I can fit them all in.
All right, talk to me here, AJ.
Yeah, I'll go with Gaudreau out of the 3 guys that Paul mentioned here. Comes in at 6,400. I'm going to fade using Ovi in this one. Again, the price tag is just so high. And I think there's other ways you can get a piece of his production. I mentioned using Kuznetsov, obviously. Only once this season has Johnny Hockey failed to register a point in back-to-back games. He didn't get a point last time out, so I fully anticipate him getting back on the score sheet tonight. He's the offensive driver for this club, and that's not changing anytime soon.
Let's go favorite DFS play here at defense, Paul. We know how Jeff feels about defensemen.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same camp. As I committed to spending a lot on the top forwards, I have to use a little less on the blue line. That's why I would be leaning toward Slavin or D'Angelo on the Caps defense. Slavin is my choice because he's $1,000 cheaper. I'm good with that because they each have 8 points in their last 10 games. Slavin's on pace, in fact, for his most productive scoring season as a pro. He only cost $4,900 tonight. And I go even lower than that for Oliver Shillington of the Flames, another guy who's having a career year, and he only costs $3,200 tonight. So cheap value, but good quality on the blue line for me.
All right, good stuff. Let's go to AJ.
Well, I've obviously been taking slightly different strategy here than Paul tonight by fading both Ovi and Aho. And if you do that, I think you can comfortably pay up for both CARLSON at 6,800 and D'Angelo at 59 as the 2 most expensive guys on the board here. CARLSON gets you that Ovi share a little bit by being on the same power play. Obviously, they play 5-on-5 together as well. CARLSON's the 4th most productive blue liner this season. For D'Angelo, nearly a third of his points, 7 of 22, are scored with the man advantage, and he's also a high-volume shot producer. So I'm going top of the board for both CARLSON and D'Angelo tonight.
Jeff, what's your strategy at a position you just despise?
Just hate defensemen. Oh my God, how do they even play this game? I don't know, but I think I'm on board with AJ's strategy. You got to pay up for CARLSON. It's just such a wide gap. When there's this wide a gap between the top player at his position and then the next rung, I think you really need to get up to John Carlson tonight. Again, you're getting a piece of the Capitals' best thing, and even if you don't pair him with Ovechkin, Carlson has just produced lately. 10 points obviously in his last 10 games as well, but he's put himself in the Norris trophy candidate discussion now as well. But just from a DFS standpoint, averaging 15 points per game, 15 DraftKings points per game over his last 10 games as well. He's a great option. And if you're looking for like a real punt play, and I don't know if you need to do this on this slate, but Brady Skay has been very productive for Carolina as well. He's playing well over 20 minutes a game. He's a player who, again, will just pop up with a goal and get you one of the bonuses as well. So if you want to pair CARLSON with someone really cheap, Brady Skay is also in play tonight for me.
AJ, how about a favorite value play on this small slate?
Yeah, I've got 2 guys that I'm kind of targeting tonight. One for sure, and one we'll see. It starts with Seth Jarvis. He's a lock for me tonight at 3,100. That's criminally low for a guy that's got 14 points in 22 games this year. The fact that he's listed as a 4th liner, I think, is going to only serve to lower his drafted percentage here, but he's getting consistent looks with the number 2 power play unit there. And that's a unit that actually sees some ice time. Some teams, the second unit doesn't really get out there. The other guy is going to be dependent on the Caps line rushes at practice this morning. We tentatively over at RotoWire, you check out our depth charts. We've got Garnet Hathaway slotted in as the right winger on Ovechkin's line, and he's going to come in at just 2,700. If he holds on to that spot, I think this is a great way, again, to get that share of Ovi without having to pay up. Obviously, if they move him to a different line, I'm not quite so high on his value here.
Jeff, who you like for value?
I mean, I've given out like 5 guys under 4K already, but there's with the salaries. I mean, there's a lot of cheap guys. It's kind of nice because you almost don't have to worry about salaries tonight. It's just one of those nights. I think Brandon Saad is another player like you really should be taking a look at. Tarasenko most likely out with COVID. I mean, I haven't seen any updates, but if he's been ruled out, but likely not going to play. Last I heard. A guy like Saad, obviously already playing on the top unit, but going to get more usage now on that top power play for the St. Louis Blues. He's a complete boomer bust player, but in these situations, he's more likely, obviously, to get 3 or 4 shots on net. If he finds the back of the net, he's really cheap, and you can pair him easily with a guy like Ryan O'Reilly. So Brandon Saad in this position, again, getting more usage on the top power play unit in the NHL. Why not?
All right, Paul, I know there's been a lot of value shared already, but do you have a top value play?
I do, and it's linked to the thought that OV needs to be in your lineup. If you go that route, you can actually stack the Caps top line, and the reason why was spelled out very clearly by AJ. If that situation holds and Garnet Hathaway joins that top unit again, he's come off a stretch where he's got 6 points in his last 10 games and 26 shots on goal too. Still, that's pretty cheap and terrific value in my opinion. The guy that we haven't mentioned yet, though, we haven't talked too much about the St. Louis Blues options, and I've indicated my preference for the Caps, but I might like to find a way to get Jordan Kyrou into the lineup since he costs only $4,100 tonight. He's been a top performer for the Blues as yet another breakout performer that I highlight on today's show. Got 12 points in his last 10 games and is better than a point per game year to date, actually. And I also like his shots on goal rate, which is verging on 3 per game.
All right, guys, we'll wrap it up here. Favorite sportsbook bet, DK sportsbook bet. Paul, quickly.
I am a little surprised that the Caps are only a -105 fave on the road. Having mentioned the Blues' loose defensive record in Binnington's last 4 starts, that vulnerability is sure to be tested by the Caps' high-octane offense, which is healthy, save for Anthony Mantha. I think this is the game to target, as I see the other one as more of a toss-up.
AJ.
I'm going to look player prop in this one. I know I've been talking Caps all day, but I actually really like Oscar Sundqvist of the Blues to score a goal at +425 on the DK Sportsbook. He's going to get a bigger opportunity with Tarasenko on the COVID list. He's going to play with Brandon Saad and David Perron.
And Jeff?
Honestly, I think you just take the Carolina Hurricanes on the money line. I mean, they're only -180. It sounds like a small line, but I mean, this Calgary Flames team has just gotten throttled their last 2 times out against similar Eastern Conference opponents. I think they're outmatched here. I think the Hurricanes continue the pain for the Flames tonight, and I think that's a pretty good value, to be honest, with Carolina at home.
Guys, nice work this week. I'll see you on Monday, which just so happens to be when the College Football National Championship arrives, and we will preview that here in just a moment. Final block of the show, and it's damn good to have Awesemo.com's Ben Rassa with us for a fun little preview of the College Football National Championship. Arriving on Monday, a rematch of the SEC Championship game between Alabama and Georgia. Before we get to the game, Ben, the big man over at Awesemo.com here, we got the namesake of the company, taking down the DK Millie Maker last week. We're actually talking to Alex later today in an interview that you can see on our Bally Sports Show on Sunday at noon. But what were the vibes like with everyone in the company after his big win?
Yeah, it was very exciting. I do the Sunday morning show with him, so I'm gonna say that maybe some of my takes incepted that lineup. But that's probably doubtful.
Great.
But no, it was very cool to see. Obviously, just awesome. A long time coming. He's burned the edges so many times in that exact tournament. It was awesome to see him break through.
Right. Was there cake? Was there Chick-fil-A?
We didn't get any cake.
Nothing.
I know. I
Nothing
got to
at all.
talk to. These are the kind of questions I hope you ask him, because I didn't get any cake after the big win.
Okay, 1,000%, because we all know he has the money now, so he can't pull that card. Let's get to the title game though on Monday here, Ben. We saw what Bama did to the Dogs, right, in the SEC title game. How much sense does it make to you that Georgia is a 3-point favorite here?
Yeah, so this was one of the fascinating things when it was quickly clear that it was going to be Alabama and Georgia. It was, they were around 7-point favorite the first time. Bama crushed them, and now we see them still favorite. I do think it's still warranted, though. I know recency bias in one game, but all in all, the body of work from Georgia, unless Bama has their number, we're going to get into it. I think that Georgia is still the rightful favorite.
Yeah, I know it's fresh in our heads. I mean, it's a small, that result of that game. It's a small data point, a collection of data points. I definitely agree with you there. If you look at the first half spread numbers, though, right now, Georgia by 0.5 point. So what do you think about the idea of playing in the first half in this game?
Yeah, I don't mind doing some things like that, maybe even being exotic and go like, halftime, full-time bet where you're trying to pick the winner of each. And I think really for me, and for Georgia, it's more important for Georgia to get out to a quick start than Alabama. I think Alabama, they have the tools to come back. If Georgia falls behind again and the pressure mounts and it goes to their passing game, I do worry about that. So if you're looking for the first half, if you like Georgia, I do think that Georgia's more likely to win from start to finish than Alabama.
And I know looking at the total here, the teams combined for 65 points the first time around. So are you feeling the over again?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because, it's just such an outlier game. Georgia's defense, they hadn't given up more than 17 points to any team the entire year. Now, you could say level of competition obviously steps up with Bama, but that 41 points stands out. I think it's kind of an outlier. We're going to find out, obviously. So to me, again, formulating the strategy, crafting the narrative, I think that Georgia, again, wants to slow the game, lean on the defense, lean on the running game, quick passes like we saw against Michigan, where they just had a phenomenal game plan. I lean under because I do think, I'm kind of tipping my hand here, that Georgia may be able to control the tempo.
Yeah, to put it this way, too, I'm looking at here, 41 points the Bulldogs allowed in that game. That was more than 30% of the points that they allowed all season long. Also, the under 7-3 in Georgia's last 10 games as well. So I think you could be onto something here, Ben. Are there any other betting angles, though, you're looking at in this game?
Yeah, so I think one thing we saw, again, against Michigan was they mitigated that pass rush of Hutchinson and co. by getting the ball out extremely quick. A lot of screen passes, a lot of bubble screens, Cook, Bowers. I think we see that again. So if you're looking to player props, things of that nature, I think Georgia's attack is going to be quick, easy throws. Don't make Stetson Bennett drop back 50 times. That is not the recipe. And on the other side, obviously, Georgia always stops the run. So it's going to be, can they force Bryce Young into some mistakes? They weren't able to do it the first time. Those, to me, are the keys to this game.
Yeah, and, Bennett, I think he threw for more than 300 yards. Most of the damage was done in that first half. There's been questions about who should be the starter for them, all season long. I think he put a lot of them to rest, right?
He did. He's been, credit where credit is due. Not that I'm sure Stetson Bennett doesn't really care what I think, but he has been way better than I thought he was.
Yeah.
He really has shown that he has full control of the team. I just don't think that Georgia wants to get into a back and forth with them. Their strength, their advantage is defensively. They've got the backs. Stetson Bennett managed the game, don't win the game.
Yeah. I knew prior to that game, a lot of people were questioning whether he had the ability to hang points if it became an offensive shootout. So some of those questions answered there. Aside from betting angles, though, who do you think walks away with the title on Monday? Do you think Kirby Smart can get the monkey off his back and finally defeat his mentor, Nick Saban?
He better, because this is as good a shot. I mean, it's so tough to beat a great team twice. They've got that going for them. I think that Georgia is the best team. I thought Michigan could give them a game, and I was dead wrong about that. Georgia is just phenomenal. I'm hopeful, and I believe that they learned some things from the first time that they played Bama in a game that I'm not saying they didn't show all they could, but Georgia was in the playoff. I think that is an important data point. Even if they lost, as we saw, they were going to get in. Bama, not so much. So all the chips are on the table. I think that Georgia's going to win. I really do. I think their defense will make adjustments. I don't think either team will be able to run the ball. Georgia finally beats Bama in the national championship and gets it done.
All right. So sorry, Nick Saban, your 7th championship there at Alabama. We'll have to wait. Ben, it's always great seeing your face and talking to you, man. Thanks for the help. Enjoy the game on Monday. We're going to see everyone back here on The Sweat on Sunday at high noon on Bally Sports Networks.